Booktube, Matt here with another edition of Recent Reads, and I actually have a few things to talk about. Last time I was partway through, or maybe near to the finish, of Hothouse by Brian Aldiss from 1962. Although started out as 5 short stories, or at least it was serialized in the magazine of science fiction fantasy the year before, so 1961. At first, when I finished this, I thought, kind of a disappointing ending, which I had heard from other people who had seen me talking about it and left comments. But now that time has passed and I've thought about it, I actually really enjoyed it, and its faults, I think, can kind of be largely attributed to the fact that it's a fix-up novel. Because really you have it's broken into 5 little mini adventure or segments, kind of. They fit pretty seamlessly. You know, I didn't necessarily notice where they all ended and began, but really what this book really achieves is incredible world building. It's a dying Earth story, millions, if not a billion years in the future. A little unrealistic, that humanity would still be around and so unchanged, however changed they are. It's the far future. The world is a giant jungle, tidally locked to the sun. Earth is tidally locked to the sun, so there's one side always facing the sun, and so this is kind of a hothouse. It's just ended up with, the sun is also, changed. It's pumping out a lot more radiation. So we have kind of this jungle setting, and the moon is also fixed in a Trojan point. So anyways, we do have humans living in the giant boughs of these trees, which actually we only really know about one continent, or possibly it's the only continent left. Certainly it's probably the only continent on the sun-facing side of the Earth, and it's dominated by plant life, but more than any other plant, one species has taken over the entire continent, and that is a banyan tree. So, millions of roots going in, or trunks, and then millions of other trunks, and then a lot of different ecosystems on the bottom, in the middle of the trees, and the canopy. And humans live in the middle. They're about 1/5 the size of a human today, and they're green, and they probably have other physiological differences, physical differences probably. At least I like to imagine it makes it a little more realistic. But they basically are nomads half the time, unless they've recently had babies. But their whole existence is just surviving against the wildlife. So there's almost no mammals or higher wildlife. It's really just humans. Most of the insects are gone. There's a type of bee, type of wasp, I think, and like a couple others. Mostly it's just plant life, but plant life in the past billion years has kind of evolved to be half vegetable, half animal. So really what the humans are mostly fighting, aside from the odd wasp, which, compared to them is quite large, is just the plant life, which is almost entirely hostile, all competing against one another, for sunlight. And the story opens with the leader of, there's only like 17 humans in this group. There's other groups scattered, we only hear about them. And the leader of this group has made one too many mistakes and decides it's time for the adults to move on and leave the kids to themselves, which I kind of had issues with that. These kids are super young. They're like 12. But this kind of culture and society that's growing up basically is really around protecting the youth, but especially protecting the males. There's very few males that are born these days, and they, need to protect the men. So it's really the women that run the show in these tribes, but there's been too many deaths and mistakes and close calls, and the leader decides, all right, us adults need to move on. We're just endangering the children, which I did have fault with. It's kind of a ridiculous notion to kind of get the story going. You could have just had them separated. I think that would have been a better narrative. But the humans decide, all right, we're going to go to heaven, which basically means, in their twisted minds, ascending to the canopy, climbing into these little capsules and waiting for the giant spiders. The other probably most dominant life form in this future is these mile-high, mile-wide, half vegetable, half insect spiders who have tethered the moon to the earth with webs and come and go as they please. And we learn there's a lot of little tiny info dumps that kind of just give you little knowledge about the biosphere or how creatures came to be, how the world got the way it is. And as the spiders were rising, so too were large populations of bees and stuff, and they kind of fought, and so the spiders just kind of migrated to the moon. But they come and go. They fill up with oxygen and helium and kind of shut down their higher functions when they get up into the atmosphere and just kind of launch and then coast from Earth to the moon, kind of just in sleep mode, basically. But the humans have got it in their minds that these spiders are kind of like the gods, and when they're ready to die, they basically crawl into these capsules, fall asleep, I think for lack of oxygen. Basically, they believe they're going into this capsule to die, but they take these capsules from a plant. It's just a natural fiber capsule thing. They strategically put it where the spiders come and go, and then they crawl in, and they hope that the spiders, as they pass, because the spiders are covered in pollen and other stuff, they hope the capsule will stick to it, and even though they're dead, they will ascend into heaven attached to that spider, which I thought was a really cool idea, and I like these spider things. I can't remember what they were called, but they were really neat. And so the humans suicide, except that the afterlife is not what they thought. They're still alive and they wake up elsewhere, which is the moon, which is now, it's been terraformed by the spiders with plant life. So there's an atmosphere, and there's kind of very differently evolved humans living there who believe that the moon is the true world, and they are constantly raiding the earth for these other humans. The humans think they're being attacked by beetle-like humanoids, but actually it's just differently evolved humans from the moon who are trying to rescue more regular human stock from the earth to save them from the hell they live in and to, increase their own population. But there's no communication, maybe a language barrier or something. The humans are always running away from these guys. Anyway, that leaves the kids on their own. And the story is really their adventures, multiple adventures, with a high attrition rate that ends with only one or two of them left alive. But they meet other people, and their travels come and go, or take them all over the place. So while the narrative is really meandering, the world building is incredible. The different plant life he comes up with. There's a species of tree that at some point learned to farm humans. It just uses like tentacular branches to, I don't know if it had human DNA and grew these humans or captured them long ago and they're just long living and basically mind wiped. But they're attached at the back of the neck and they just do the tree's bidding. They go to the nearby river and fish, and that's how they keep themselves alive. But they basically protect the tree. They nourish the tree. They're just mindless servants. And our main character and his friends come across them and accidentally get involved with one and hack his linkage to this tree, and then his consciousness resurfaces and he's terrified. Really cool imagery. Near the end, our characters have made it to the Terminator because they've gotten stuck on this migrating flower, I guess. And because competition is so fierce in the jungle, way down below, they're having to migrate further and further toward the Terminator to find just an area where there's sunlight, but also less competition. But it goes past the Terminator, and now we're on the dark side of the earth, and we're wondering what's going to happen to our heroes here. They're starting to freeze to death. But we enter this really cool, eternal midnight landscape, except that the peaks of mountains are, of course, lit by the sun, which is just barely over the horizon. And so there's all these ecosystems on these mountaintops, and they make it to a mountaintop, and eventually reunite with some of the adults from the moon. Really cool. Like I said, at first I was disappointed, but when I really started thinking about how it was a serialized series of stories that were then combined, and they did in '62 win the Hugo Award, I think collectively as stories. I don't know if that means taken all together they won the award, or once they were actually published as a novel or a fixed-up novel, if this is what won. I'm not sure. I didn't do my homework in that respect, but I really enjoyed this. Another theme in it was intelligent fungus that kind of takes over lots of life forms, but has never managed to land on a human. And when it does, it finds vast stores of knowledge inside the human consciousness and makes itself smarter. Begins an uneasy relationship with our main character and ultimately starts controlling the main character to get what it wants. It was really cool. Took me places I did not expect. Don't read it for the plot, read it for the atmosphere and the world building. Loved it. Compared to what I had read just before that, Galaxies Like Grains of Sand, which I'm not sure if this is a fix-up novel, but certainly it's just a series of interconnected stories that I did not enjoy. So that got me back on track with Aldous. I really loved that. And I was still feeling like I wanted to experience that atmosphere. So I picked up Doris Piserchia's Earthchild, which Stephen Andrews at Outlaw Bookseller was recently reading. Because this is also a far future Dying Earth story. This one published in '77. So quite some time after, but similar atmosphere and themes. But not nearly as good. It's very strange. Again, it's far future. Plant life has taken over the world, but the only human left on Earth is a young girl. She's 10 or 12, named Ree, or Ree. I think it's 2 syllables. And she is orphaned after her parents are... actually, here's another strange parallel to Hothouse. The rest of humanity ages ago migrated to Mars because this protoplasmic entity, I don't know if it was an alien creature that made it to Earth or some kind of human experiment that got out of control. There's hints that it could be either, but it's never really revealed. But it's sentient and taken over most of the planet and is slowly just eating all the jungle life. So at some point, humanity abandoned Earth and they're on Mars. But they continually raid Earth to try and kill this sentient protoplasm thing, but also kidnap the few feral humans they can find. So again, very similar to Hothouse. This little girl's the only remaining human. She likes living on Earth. She is protected by this other protoplasm, which goes by the name of Amiru, and it is also sentient. And the other organism that's kind of malevolent is called Indigo, and it's blue, and it's basically taken over the oceans of Earth, and it just is the oceans, and it's encroaching on the land. It's eating all the jungle life, and it's starting to encroach on Ree's territory. And she's projected into the future at various points in time by being encased inside of Amiru, who basically turns into a crystal and just keeps her in stasis. And the whole book, Indigo is trying to kill this girl for reasons we aren't sure of, in many different forms, but usually by manifesting in semi-conscious, semi-sentient little humanoids that are blue, that she calls blue boys. They're always trying to talk to her, become friends with her, and then stab her in the back, kill her basically. But she's wise to them and basically hunts them down on her giant bird thing, which hates her and is constantly trying to kill her. She hunts them down and kills them. And that's her life. And the book is meandering, worse than Hothouse. There's a lot of Ree and Amiru versus Indigo for the future of the planet Earth, basically. But I don't know what the point was, if there was a message, if the two different protoplasms were some kind of metaphor or something. If there was a different message in the story, I didn't get it. So a lot of it was lost on me. Stephen Andrews does a much better explanation of basically the tone and the themes of the story, because there's really not any plot. I'd suggest watching his video about it. But the way she writes and the things she creates, it's still interesting to read, but not much of a plot. I have read her Earth and Twilight. Earthchild was 77 and this was 81. I don't remember much about this, but it was quite similar, just meandering around in a post civilized Earth kind of thing that's overgrown with jungles and stuff. I have a couple others by her, Star Rider, which she's maybe best known for. And I have this hard copy, A Billion Days of Earth. She's a strange writer. This was good, and I like my, fairly nice dog copy, but it's really nothing too special. Nonsensical at times, but still there's something there to enjoy. There's our main character with her giant bird creature. Very heavy metal. Yeah, very heavy metal, like the movie and the comic with the girl in a far future ravaged Earth flying around on a giant griffin-like thing. So that was good, but a bit of a letdown. After that, I went to a new-to-me author. I had that recent book haul with a bunch of hardcovers, most of which were book club editions. This is not. This is The Dark Beyond the Stars by Frank M. Robinson, which is a new-to-me author. I was going through some of those hardcovers I got because I knew I wasn't going to keep many of them. It's just there was some there I wanted, and I got all of them for $7. This looked like something that might be a good read, but not something I would want to keep. So I figured, let's read it now, and then I can get rid of it if it's nothing too special. And it wasn't anything too special. It's about a generation ship that's been sent from Earth 2,000 years ago to search for life, basically find life and then come back to Earth, prove that life exists. A pretty weak justification for this interstellar mission. There could have been a little more to it than that. It was pretty weak. The story is about a 17-year-old kid who wakes up on the ship with amnesia. Very stereotypical. This was written in 91, so a lot of that type of thing has come since. But it's really about this character coming to grips with who he is and the culture on board the ship. At this point, 2,000 years, it's about 90 or 100 generations have come and gone. And there is currently a mutiny being planned, and they're trying to recruit him for the mutiny because there has been a divide among the members of the ship. The captain, who is the only immortal on the ship, he was there when it launched 2,000 years ago, frustrated with 2,000 years of failure, has decided we're going to cross the gap between spiral arms of the Milky Way, where the stars on the other side are much richer, much more concentrated. There's be a much better chance of finding life. But the captain is kind of nuts, and the crew knows the ship will never survive going through the spiral arm, which would take another 2,000 years. And their reasoning is, we don't think the ship will survive during our lifetime, let alone another 100 generations. We want to mutiny, take over the ship, turn it back toward Earth, so our descendants will make it to Earth, basically, and have some sort of life. So the main character is divided because the captain has taken an interest in him, so the mutiny wants him because he's kind of like an inside man to the captain, and it's really about this kid coming to grips with who he is, who the captain is, and whether or not this mutiny is who he should side with. But ultimately, this story really didn't have to take place on a spaceship. It didn't have to be science fiction. It's nominally science fiction. There's a couple stops on other worlds with exploration, maybe alien encounters, but really it's just kind of a psychological story, and very kind of dark and gritty. It's not exactly YA, but it has kind of early YA-ish feelings. So I'm not keeping this. It was like a 3 out of 5. It was all right. But what I did want to talk about was another book of his that I'm very interested in and actually already ordered. So yeah, he wrote a book in 1956 called The Power. And Frank M. Robinson is not someone I had heard of until I came across The Dark Beyond the Stars. So I looked him up, and he was a science fiction and techno-thriller writer between the 50s and the 90s. Wrote a handful of novels and I think a lot of short stories. I have the synopsis here for The Power, though. It really intrigued me, and so I found a vintage copy on eBay for cheap. So that's currently on the way. But it reads like this. A researcher named Tanner discovers evidence of a person with psychic abilities among his coworkers. As he tries to uncover the superhuman, his existence is erased and his associates murdered until he faces a showdown with an apparently invincible opponent. That sounded really good when you think about when it was written, the 50s. I think it's going to be really interesting. And Frank M. Robinson's a decent writer. It was not bad. And one more, I read the Best of Fritz Leiber, part of the classic science fiction by Ballantine and Del Rey. These were put out in the 70s. I've been reading them with Richard at Vintage SF and Ira at SF Words of Wonder, although we had a bit of a hiatus. But we're back with our fourth collaborative read. We've already recorded the video discussion, and I believe it'll be on Rich's channel September 2nd. So I'm not going to talk about the Best of Fritz Leiber because we had a great, I think it's just under an hour discussion. It was really fun, and it was my turn to choose our next read. And I went with someone who none of the three of us have read anything by this author. It's the Best of Raymond Z. Galoon, who was a pulp writer in the 30s, 40s, 50s. I think he wrote up to the 80s. But none of us have read anything by him. So I think the Fritz Leiber had, I believe, 22 stories. I think this has 12 or 13. And I'm really interested. I think these are going to be some pulpy space opera adventures. Probably not great characterization, but in the last couple of years, if you've been following along on the channel, I've really fallen in love with earlier science fiction, right down to the pulp stuff. 30s, 40s, 50s, really loving it. And this will be a new to me author as well. So I won't be starting this for quite some time because we have, 4 weeks to read it. So that'll be a little later. And I picked this off my shelf yesterday, Flatland by Edwin Abbott, which was published in the 1800s, about the character A Square, who lives in a two-dimensional world. And either comes into contact with the three-dimensional world or one dimension or something. Yeah, Lineland, which is one dimension. Kind of like an early thought experiment, but a very early science fiction-ish novel, or really novella. I believe it's like 80 pages. I've got a Dover Thrift Edition, which is not really a publisher I'd heard of. Dover Publications, New York. Yeah, this was published in 2014. Just a short read. I thought it might be interesting, so I might check that out. Then I was also feeling like maybe reading some Poul Anderson. World Without Stars is one I've been curious about for a while. Just a cool concept. I have a love and hate relationship with Poul Anderson. I've loved some of his stuff and found other stuff just almost unreadable. But he wrote a lot, so that doesn't surprise me. This is one of those old, tiny Ace copies, and it's only 120-something pages, so I might check that out. I feel like I'm kind of getting back into the swing of reading. Ups and downs, of course, after, a lot of drama in my life, but getting back together with Richard and Ira for a video was really good. Might do some other random collaboratives, just buddy reads and discussions, I think would be fun, but nothing concrete yet. But yeah, that's where I'm at, and I think I got a tiny book haul video coming out probably after this. I'll probably film that right now after this and put it out a couple days after this one. Anyways, as always, thanks for watching, thanks for commenting, always appreciate it. I enjoy interacting with commenters and meeting new people who like science fiction. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.